Imagine standing under the brightest lights of your life, while carrying the darkest pain no one can see. The crowd is screaming your name. Confetti is falling. America is celebrating you as a miracle. But behind that smile, something is breaking. Richard Goodall didn't just win America's Got Talent. He survived it. Because months after the victory, behind closed doors, Simon Cowell, the toughest judge in television history, quietly admitted something that shocked everyone. Richard wasn't just singing songs. He was bleeding through his voice. And what finally made Simon cry wasn't the music. It was the truth Richard had hidden for decades. Richard Goodall spent most of his life being invisible. Not ignored out of cruelty, but forgotten by the world. For over 20 years, he worked as a janitor at a middle school in Indiana. Empty hallways, trash bags, locked classrooms, day after day, year after year. No applause, no spotlight, no one asking about his dreams. Music lived inside him, but only in silence. He sang alone, after work, at home, when grief became too loud to ignore. He never believed a stage was meant for someone like him. Then one ordinary moment changed everything. At a small school event, someone recorded him singing. No filters, no preparation, no intention to be seen. Just a man, and a voice full of life, loss, and honesty. That video exploded. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. A janitor, with a voice that sounded like decades of heartbreak and hope mixed together. When the clip reached America's Got Talent, it stopped everyone, especially Simon Cowell. Simon has heard thousands of voices. But this one didn't sound trained. It sounded lived. When Richard stepped onto the AGT stage, fear was written all over him. He wasn't built for attention. He was built for survival. And when he started singing, the room froze. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Simon didn't hear a contestant. He heard a man who had been holding pain inside for years. After the audition, Richard's life exploded overnight. Interviews, headlines, millions of views. The janitor with a golden voice. But while the world was celebrating, Richard was drowning. Years earlier, he had lost his first wife to cancer. A pain he never healed from. A grief he buried under routine and silence. Success didn't erase that pain. It magnified it. Viewers began noticing something strange. Between performances, Richard looked distant. Heavy. As if each song was costing him something. Then Simon did something he almost never does. He spoke honestly. Simon revealed that Richard was carrying unresolved grief, pain so deep it shaped every note he sang. And as Simon talked about it, his voice cracked. The man known for crushing dreams was holding back tears. Because Simon recognized himself. He knew what it was like to build success on top of emotional wounds. To smile publicly and suffer privately. Richard's story was no longer just inspiring. It was painful and human. As the competition continued, Richard didn't rely on tricks or drama. He stood still. He sang. And people felt everything he never said. One of the most emotional moments came when he performed with Journey, a band whose music had carried him through the loneliest chapters of his life. Standing beside them felt unreal. Like time had finally caught up with his soul. In September 2024, Richard Goodall won America's Got Talent. $1 million prize. National fame. A fairy tale ending. But even that had a hidden truth. The $1 million wasn't really $1 million. It was spread over 40 years. Or reduced drastically if taken up front. Contracts limited freedom. Producers controlled decisions. Winning wasn't freedom. It was pressure. Right before the finale, Richard quietly married his longtime partner, Angie. She was his anchor, the one person who saw the man behind the miracle. Soon after the win, his body collapsed from stress. Hernia surgery forced him to stop. To breathe. To feel everything he had been avoiding. And when everyone expected him to leave his old life behind, Richard did the unthinkable. He went back to work. Same school. Same hallways. Same students. Not because he lacked ambition, but because he needed grounding. Fame had shaken him. Routine saved him. With Angie's support, Richard also uncovered a missing part of his identity, meeting his biological father for the first time and discovering siblings he never knew existed. A lifetime of unanswered questions, finally faced. Offers poured in. Albums. Performances. The Grand Ole Opry. Standing ovations. Yet Richard refused to become someone else. He created a fund to help students chase music dreams they couldn't afford. He returned to schools, not as a star, but as proof that it's never too late. Meanwhile, Simon Cowell's own past mirrored the pain he saw in Richard. A childhood without warmth. A career built from humiliation, public scandals, a near-paralyzing accident. Success didn't save Simon either. It just hid the scars better. That's why Richard broke him. Because Richard wasn't chasing fame. He was surviving grief. And in a world obsessed with winners, his real victory wasn't the trophy. It was staying human. So when the lights went out, and the applause faded, Richard Goodall didn't become a different man. He became visible. And maybe that's why his story hurts so much. Because it reminds us how many voices we never hear. Until it's almost too late. As the competition moved forward, something unsettling started to happen behind the scenes. Richard wasn't sleeping properly. The pressure, the cameras, the expectations, all of it was crushing him silently. People thought his pauses on stage were dramatic. They weren't. They were moments where his mind was fighting memories he never spoke about. Late at night, alone in hotel rooms, Richard admitted he questioned whether stepping into the spotlight had been a mistake. Not because he feared failure, but because success was reopening wounds he had buried for decades. Every song forced him to relive his wife's final days. The hospital rooms. The quiet goodbyes. The moment he realized he would have to live the rest of his life without her. Producers later revealed that before one major performance, Richard almost walked away from the show completely. He stood backstage, shaking, whispering that he didn't think he could do this anymore. No cameras showed that moment. No headlines mentioned it. But Simon Cowell saw it. And that's when Simon realized something terrifying. This man wasn't chasing a dream. He was barely holding himself together. That realization changed everything about how the judges looked at Richard. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a man bleeding in front of millions, and calling it music. After the finale, when the confetti was cleaned and the cameras shut off, Richard's story didn't turn magical. It turned quiet. Painfully quiet. The phone stopped ringing at night. The crowds disappeared. And for the first time since the show began, Richard was alone with his thoughts again. That's when the truth hit him hardest. Winning didn't heal him. It didn't erase the loss. It didn't bring back the years he spent believing his voice didn't matter. In a private conversation that never aired, Simon Cowell admitted something that stunned those present. He said Richard's journey scared him, because it showed how close talent and tragedy can live together. Simon confessed that if Richard had not been surrounded by support at the right moment, the story could have ended very differently. Not with applause, but with silence. Richard himself later said something even more haunting. He said, "If that video was never recorded, I don't know how long I would have kept going." Those words changed how people understood his win. This was never just a talent show story. It was a rescue, arriving just in time. Today, Richard still sings, still works, still stays grounded. But the world now knows the truth. Behind one of the most inspirational wins in America's Got Talent history was a man standing dangerously close to giving up. And maybe the real miracle wasn't the golden buzzer. Maybe it was the fact that someone finally heard him before it was too late. And the most frightening part is this. America almost lost Richard Goodall forever, without ever knowing the voice it never bothered to hear. Sometimes the loudest miracles are born from the quietest pain, and most of them don't survive long enough to be saved.